Where Toowoomba now stands, there was once an extensive swamp, but by the middle of this century only a small section remained. The years rolled by, and it was coming up to 1988, Australia's bicentennial year, and like many other towns and cities, Toowoomba had received a grant for a project for Australia's 200th birthday. Many and varied were the suggestions brought before the City Council, until Toowoomba resident Ken Ferrier saw through this seemingly endless swampland with a vision of restoring the area to something akin to its original state. In so doing, he foresaw the creation of an aquatic habitat which would attract many species of water birds as well as other wildlife, and so provide a location of interest and beauty to the city. As a result of his effort, and those of the Field Naturalists Club and Toowoomba Green Watch, the development of the waterbird habitat was adopted as the city's main bicentennial project, and construction commenced in 1985. The habitat, bordered by Mackenzie, Alderley and Aberdeen streets, covers 7.6 hectares of land, a relatively small area in which to establish a diverse wetland. Under the watchful eye of local residents and interested parties, the work was completed on time, and all that was needed was lots of water to add the finishing touch. Then, as if Mother Nature had been given the signal, along it came right on cue, filling the lakes to capacity. As if to prove a point to the people who worked so hard to make this restoration possible, nature turned on a dazzling display of beauty and colour, using only mist and the tranquility of the early morning. The golden wattle surrounding the lakes proclaimed the arrival of spring of 1987, which now meant time was fast running out. While the major earthworks were finished, there was still a vast amount of work to be carried out. Because of the availability of water and the warm weather was approaching, people were starting to use the lakes as a swimming hole, and so it was necessary to erect a fence to keep out the trespassers. After all, this was to be a place of refuge for the birds. The habitat contains both deep and shallow lakes, areas of reed, mud banks, islands and grass areas to provide feeding, roosting and nesting conditions for different species of birds. The middle lake is mostly shallow and is well suited to wading birds. Its water level can be raised and lowered to control weed growth in exposed mud banks. Periodic draining of wetland hastens the release of organic nutrients from plants, which on reflooding produce growth flushes of the small organisms on which many water birds feed. The outlet of the last lake has a silt trap, which during flood periods prevents the city's drainage system from silting up. The months were rolling by, and our bicentennial year was approaching all too fast. A paved pathway was to be laid to run the full length of the habitat. This was an opportunity for many of the city's unemployed to learn new job skills. Men and women cheerfully worked together with the knowledge that not only were they gainfully employed, they were also adding to the beauty of the city while providing a place for wildlife to be safe from predators. By this time, viewing platforms were erected in strategic points to allow observation of the birds without disturbing them. While many of the original trees and shrubs were left intact, quite a few had to be removed to make way for landscaping. To make up for this shortfall of trees, it was necessary to plant over 2,000 native trees and shrubs if it were to attract the bird population back into the park. People from all walks of life arrived to help with the mammoth task, bringing with them a variety of tools of trade, including their own boats. While sometimes it appeared as though disaster would strike in the shipping area, no sinkings or drownings were reported. Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, Green Watch, field naturalists and service clubs all lent a hand to complete this labour of love. To name only a few, trees such as acacia, casuarina, melaleuca, callistemon and eucalyptus were being planted to attract as many birds as possible into this pocket of bushland. The best way to conserve all our bird species is to preserve their habitats. This can be done by setting up nature reserves such as this, so that adequate samples of bush will be kept for all time. Have we cared enough for this treasure house of birds which has survived for millions of years? Does Australian history record the same level of destruction of our birds as our mammals? Fortunately not. In the sad story of extinction of our animals in Australia, our birds are the one bright note. There is no room for complacency, however, as many of our birds are trembling on the brink of extinction. Advancement of civilization does not necessarily mean dispersal of bird life. These habitats exist in our sprawling cities in such places where administrative bodies wisely provide and maintain parks and gardens, and where home occupants delight in doing what they can to keep birds about their properties. Although it is possible for humans and birds to coexist, the birds at times prefer a certain amount of privacy, and with this in mind, a hide was erected beside the wading pool, thus allowing the keen photographer and bird watchers observation at close quarters without disturbing the daily routine of the first inhabitants on the lake. A floating island was installed for creature comforts as well. And while on the subject of creature comforts, the final and a very important part of the project was the building of something for the humans who would be attracted here, and it turned out to be one of the most elaborate toilet blocks constructed in the city. At last the big day arrived, January the 26th, 1988, our 200th birthday. And like cities and towns all over Australia, special projects such as this one were being opened or dedicated in all sorts of ways. His Worship the Mayor, Alderman Clive Berghofer, MLA, performed the unveiling of the plaque at the Alderley Street entrance. After this ceremony, the crowd then moved to the Mackenzie Street entrance to witness a second unveiling. Being a keen naturalist and an outspoken identity in the Green Watch organisation, and because of her efforts in the construction of the habitat, the honour of unveiling the second plaque was given to Mrs. Peg Isipi. And now, after all the activity had ceased, it was time for the birds to take over. Few other creatures have so captured the imagination of man as the birds. Today, the study of birds outstrips all other fields of natural history. In Australia, there can be few adults who at some time in their school days were not members of a bird study group. Like man, birds do not live by bread alone. Nesting sites are very important. Thus, if birds and their songs are to remain a part of our everyday lives, we must make sure we secure them from extinction by providing areas such as this, where they are safe from predators and are free to nest and coexist with the human population. For our feathered friends, this is indeed a place of refuge.